I am about to do a radical thing that has not been done in most UU congregations probably in the past 50 to 100 years. I am about to read a portion of the King James Version of the Bible. Now, before you rush to click leave meeting or turn down the volume, I invite you to humor me, as I think you will quickly see from what I read that there is method to my madness. This is from the book of Numbers, chapter 24, verses 8 and 9. God brought him forth out of Egypt. He hath, as it were, the strength of an unicorn. He shall eat up the nations, his enemies, and shall break their bones, and pierce them through with his arrows. He couched, he lay down as a lion, and as a great lion, who shall stir him up? Blessed is he that blesseth thee, and cursed is he that curseth thee. Several years ago, when I was serving as an intern at the Welcome Table Christian Church in Arlington, Texas, I got the opportunity to participate in a somewhat unusual tradition that had begun the summer before when I arrived at the church. Instead of the usual sermon series that the church did every month, the minister invited the congregation to text or email suggestions for different Bible passages and topics to preach on, inviting them to give feedback on what they wanted to hear. My immediate response was to pull out my phone in the middle of the service and text him with my vote for the topic of unicorns in the Bible. Now, the first time that I texted this suggestion to him, it was honestly meant as a joke. It was very well known at that church of my somewhat pathological obsession with all things unicorns. I could imagine the minister responding back with a response along the lines of, "Why am I not surprised that you would say something like that?" But the second time that he asked the congregation for sermon suggestions, I texted him the same topic, but this time I was very much serious. I looked up to that particular minister not just as a supervisor, but as a mentor as well. I was interested what he would do with that kind of challenge, and I wanted to see what the sermon that would result. But alas, the unicorn sermon never materialized. And then the minister went out of town and entrusted the pulpit to his ready and willing intern minister. It was at that point that I figured that if it is a sermon about unicorns that I wanted, then it was a sermon about unicorns I was going to have to preach for myself. So, brace yourselves. This is my unicorn sermon. It is admittedly a stretch to spend an entire sermon talking about unicorns in the Bible. The word unicorn only appears 9 times in the Bible, such as in Numbers 24:8, and it is only in the King James Version, which was completed in 1611. Most biblical scholars will tell you that this is the result of a translation error. Numbers comprises one of the first 5 books of the Torah, the sacred text of Judaism, so it was originally written in Hebrew. The Hebrew word in Numbers 24:8 is re'em, which is a word that Western European biblical translators were completely unfamiliar with, but they were pretty sure it was some type of large, strong animal. Now, whenever the translators for the King James Version of the Bible encountered a Hebrew word that they did not recognize, they would cross-reference that word with a Septuagint, a complete Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, to see what the corresponding Greek word would have been in order to base their English translation off of that. The Greek word for re'em in Numbers 24:8 was monokeros, which literally translates to one horn. Based on this, the translators for the King James Version determined that the most relevant word for that particular translation was unicorn. It may seem unusual now, based on the images that we have of unicorns today, but the concept of unicorns would have been very familiar to Western European society during the Renaissance. The Greek historian of the 5th century BC, Ctesias, recounted stories that he had heard while traveling in Persia about an animal that resembled a wild ass with a horn that was, quote, one of the strongest of all creatures. It defends itself with its horn, teeth, and hooves, and slays many horses and men, end quote. The Chinese prominently featured a unicorn-like creature in their mythology called a qilin, which had the front half of a horse with a single horn, and the back half of a dragon or fish, sort of a unicorn-mermaid hybrid, if you will. It was said to be a symbol of good luck, good omen, protection, prosperity, success, and longevity. The animal found its way into Buddhist and Taoist cosmology, being seen as a gentle and benevolent creature who floated upon the clouds, but would become enraged if there were evil forces that threatened the human realm, often spitting fire and exhibiting a number of different powers that varied from story to story. Although there was no physical proof that such a creature existed, further mentions of it by Aristotle and Pliny the Elder meant that the unicorn was entered into the Physiologus, a Greek zoological text that was a reference to all of the many creatures that supposedly existed in the world. The unicorn was the perfect way to describe the powerful horned creature from the early Hebrew translations, but because the unicorn was also associated with being a representation of the divine, it was also associated as a symbol of innocence, purity, and self-sacrifice. In a sense, the unicorn came to become an anthropomorphic representation of the multifaceted nature of God, powerful and strong, and able to defend itself, but also majestic and loving and gentle. It became a popular symbol for knights to put on their shields, banners, and coat of arms, eventually becoming a symbol of Scotland and the Scottish kings in the process. Today, most biblical scholars will tell you that the re'em that the Hebrew text was referring to was an aurochs, a huge and now extinct ox-like creature. The New Revised Standard Version, like most other later translations, replaces the phrase with wild ox, thereby erasing the unicorn from its presence in Scripture. But even though my love of unicorns causes me to be somewhat biased, I believe that this substitution does not do the spirit of this text justice. If God is truly all-powerful, who is to say that God can't be a unicorn or should be a unicorn? I can't tell you exactly when my love affair with unicorns began. It is not something that I've carried with me since childhood. I certainly liked unicorns before, but it has not been until very recently that it has turned into the obsession that it has become. I'm pretty sure, though, that the word unicorn entered my vocabulary somewhere around 2011, after watching an episode of the television show Glee entitled I Am Unicorn. In the episode, the character of Kurt, an openly gay teenager, is struggling with the perception that people have of him being too feminine, and he worries that it will hold him back, especially as far as getting leading male roles within the musical theater department. To try and offer up a change of image, he decides to run in the upcoming elections for student class president and to try and project a more masculine persona. He enlists the help of Brittany, a fellow member of the Glee Club, to help him out as his campaign manager, but is shocked the next day when she posts a giant poster of him riding on the back of a unicorn and galloping across a rainbow underneath the slogan, "Believe in magic, believe in Kurt Hummel." When Kurt angrily confronts her about the banner, she replies back with the iconic quote, "A unicorn is someone who knows they are magical and isn't afraid to show it." Eventually, the episode ends happily, with Kurt learning to be more confident in the own unique person that he is. As a young queer adult watching that episode, I resonated with the issues of self-esteem and self-doubt that the character of Kurt had to encounter, as they were all issues that I had to tackle myself through my own coming out process. Just like Kurt, I worried whether or not people would see me for who I was beyond just my sexual orientation, and I had to learn to live into the unique person that I am, that is standing, or sitting, before you today. Brittany's quote about unicorns also mentions another, and perhaps the most important aspect of the unicorn that I have not yet touched upon: confidence. Whether depicted as pink and glittery, or whether it is displayed emblazoned upon the shield of a knight, the unicorn is still able to stand tall and stand proudly. It combines both its powerful aspects and its gentle romantic ones into one beast that refuses to be invisible. In this respect, I feel that it is completely and totally appropriate for God to be seen as a unicorn within this passage of Numbers. For me, God does have the strength of a unicorn. In the midst of the most insurmountable of odds, when you do not know how things will turn out, and when there are people who look to curse you and bring you down, the universe has a way of bringing a resolution out of what seems to be any lost and hopeless cause. Just like the unicorn who still stands majestically above it all, it allows you to put your trust in something and find hope in something that could still be there for you as a source of comfort in your hour of darkness. It may seem fantastical as a 34-year-old candidate for ministry to continue to be obsessed with a mythical horned creature that may or may not have existed. It is even more fantastical that, in the prime of your ministerial career, when you are supposed to be at your most professional, to have the image of that mythical horned creature covering every notebook, pen, pencil, notepad, and various other office supplies. My response to all the critics and naysayers out there is this: just because something may be from out of a fairy tale does not mean that there is not truth in it, and that it does not have something important to say about the greater world that we live in. I take particular inspiration in a quote I recently found from popular theologian Nadia Bolz-Weber. Quote, "I need a God who is bigger and more nimble and mysterious than what I could understand and contrive. Otherwise, it could feel like I am worshiping nothing more than my own ability to understand the divine." End quote. For me, the magic and the mystery that I find in unicorns helps to remind me of the mystery and wonder that I find when I relate to the divine through my own spiritual practice. I cannot expect that you will leave today feeling exactly the same way about unicorns as I do, and that was not the intention of the sermon in any way, shape, or form. But if I have anything to leave you with, it is that I encourage you to go out into the world and not be afraid of finding magic in the world. The world needs more magic and the mystery that reminds us of the power and wonder that we find through the divine at work in the greater world that we inhabit. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. Namaste. Thank you all so much.